Gay Carter's. Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Wiggins. I'm serving as Mayor Pro Tem today. Tracy Markley is unavailable and there this afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Gig Harbor City Council study session, Thursday, May 11th. The time now is 3:02 p.m. And I'd like to take a roll call, beginning with, on my left, Councilmember Barber.
Here.
Councilmember, oh my gosh. Rodenberg.
Here.
Thank you, Councilmember. Well,
Here.
yeah. And online, we have Councilmember Storsa.
Present virtually.
All right. And a little bit of rap.
Yeah.
And, Councilmember Martin is not here this afternoon. Excused, as well as Councilmember Henderson. Is that correct?
He may join.
Okay, terrific. So we got a full afternoon and we'll begin with the Masonic Lodge discussion. Also, would you like to introduce any staff that are here? Quickly.
Oh, certainly. City Administrator.
Katrina Cannon.
We have Stephanie, I always pronounce her last name is Seibel, Associate Engineer with Public Works Director Jeff Langholm. Chuck Roy is back in the audience. He is our wastewater superintendent. Jennifer Harrow is our Parks Manager. Tiffany Element is our Assistant City Clerk.
Terrific, thank you. So we'll start with the Masonic Lodge discussion and I'll hand it over to you, Parks Manager Harold. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And here with us today, I wanted to introduce Rich Murakami from Reluda Architects and Adam Tyner from P&D Engineers, who are our consultants. And then online, we have Juliette Vong from HBB, who's the lead consultant for this project, as well as John Kaiser from P&D Engineers. But so apologize for the length of the memo. I know it's a little bit longer than usual, but there's a lot of information in it. So our consultants have been looking at the building for a few months now and running different scenarios. There had been some minor flooding in the basement. So we also hired a separate mold inspector as there were some concerns about kids' health in the preschool, and we've hired a lead and asbestos inspector that are separate consultants hired by us directly. But the consultants prepared an estimate. We asked them to prepare an estimate of what it would cost to do the kind of minimal upgrades required to open the upper floor of the building to the public. We've had several members of the public approach us asking for a place for arts or rehearsal space, art shows, things like that. So we asked for a cost estimate, which has come out to $1.753 million, which requires movement of a structural wall to create bathroom space. So it also will upgrade some flooring, not to a major overhaul, but moving a wall, creating bathrooms and ADA access. So we've also asked them to look at the structure for earthquake seismic safety. And to get a full reading on that would cost about $100,000 with geotechnical work and kind of a little bit of demolishing the building to see what's behind there structural wise. So some things to consider are the preschool that has been there since 1987. We've had some residents ask about putting it on a historical register. We've been told that it does not qualify because of the extensive alterations for the state or federal register. And locally, we have 11 criteria. And the only one that staff thought could meet perhaps was about criteria number 5, the building is associated with the lives of persons significant in national, state, or local history, which is Lucy Goodman, who was a longtime teacher here in Gig Harbor. That would also make it more difficult to do alterations because there's more steps involved on a historical structure. Apologize for stumbling over the words. If the proposed minimal remodel is done, it will result in a net of 1,764 square feet of assembly space, plus the basement. So the building is currently valued at $128,200 by the Pierce County Assessor. And we do have, I've chatted with the fire marshal and building official on a few occasions about this building. He can't say for certain what it'll require, but it may require more fire upgrades and seismic upgrades depending upon what it is used for. So at the study session, we're requesting guidance. Gave 3 options. There are probably more if you so choose, but whether we want to demolish the building and have HBB prepare some site plans for the park, which is, as you know, is undergoing our a master plan, and they can include that now empty site in the planning, or determine a funding source for the minimal upgrades to open it to the public, or perform some basic remediation and plan for a more extensive remodel and repurpose. So as I introduced the consultants, I was going to hand it off to Juliet unless you have any questions for me, but
Any questions from council? Okay. Go ahead, Julia.
All right, thank you. Really, my job here is just to provide a little bit of context to the master planning process and just facilitate discussion and questions that you might have to get into more detail on our team. Only other things I think I would add to it, Jennifer gave a really good background and context, and I think the memo as well as the lengthy attachments, I know most of you have started reading and have gone through. The only other things I would really just offer is part of the master planning process. We just had our first open house a couple of weeks ago. It was heavily attended. And we also had an online survey that was closed, was open for 2 weeks after the open house and just closed earlier this week. There has been a lot of questions, really, as we would expect, about the Masonic Lodge. I think just some reiteration of some of the ideas, and if it stays, the types of things you could use it for, and just a general need for some kind of a similar space somewhere in the city, whether it ultimately is here or in a different location. And I just understand that's a lot of what you have to kind of think about with the value of this building, the remodel of the building. And any potential reuse. There was a question about some opportunities for if it is remodeled or even potentially torn down, are there elements that could be reused? And so we can speak a little bit about that as well if there's some more questions or in depth that we want to get into. The only other thing I would really just highlight is a lot of what we initiated with our master plan process was to make sure we did an evaluation based on what we could see, so we could understand really the context of what kinds of improvements might be needed in order to use the space, but to limit that to what was visible so that we were really conscientious of the active use as a daycare. Of course, they're in session. So in addition, if we were to go into greater detail, as Jennifer mentioned, there is cost associated with that. There is a lot of much more invasive, disruptive things that would have to happen. We'd have to literally kind of visually inspect. And so you're carrying out pieces in order to do that visual inspection. It would take time, and it would literally not allow the daycare to be in session. So if there's another step further, not only is there the cost that Jennifer mentioned, but we would only really be able to do that more high-level invasive work when the school is not in session during the summer months. Just something else to consider. And then other than that, we're just really open to delve into any questions or go into any of the content of the memo in greater detail.
Any questions from council so far? Oh, Councilmember.
Thank you. So we still don't have a determination on seismic reading, is that correct?
That is correct. And John, I'll let you speak in here for a minute as well. We cannot determine what seismic rating it would be without doing a much more in-depth, kind of invasive analysis to essentially expose the pieces we can't see. In addition to that, we also need geotechnical work in order to actually determine what criteria it would meet. And so that would take time and drilling and borings in order to get the analysis of that work. John, is that a fair statement, or is there more you want to add? You're muted, John.
Yes, that's about it. The building looks like it's in pretty good shape seismically. We just don't know anything about the foundation or the soils beneath it.
And John,
that's-
maybe you can go a little bit into what we were talking about with, you know, essentially like any building, right? Any building that is occupied that is of a similar age would be in the same situation, essentially. Like you can only evaluate what you can see, but you can make some assumptions based on the fact that it's still standing and it's withstood a number of earthquakes, but you cannot get any greater detail than that without the more invasive work.
That's true. Yep, that's exactly it. And a lot of buildings of that time frame weren't built to the modern standards that are required for current code, and that's really just the steps that we'd need to go through to know whether or not it can meet current seismic code.
If we couldn't see his face.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
no,
and
that's fine.
Councilmember Luke had a follow-up that
Additional.
the seismic would be $100,000, and that is what our consultants have quoted as the cost for a full seismic analysis.
Right, and the building is worth 128,000.
Correct.
And if that seismic would also take 4 to 5 months and the preschool can't be there, which means that we would be interfering with them for more than the summer month when they're normally closed, correct?
Well, John, maybe you can clarify, but I thought the analysis when the work would be necessary when the preschool couldn't be there is not gonna take 4 to 5 months, but it would take 4 to 5 months from the time we start the contract to get the report.
Okay, okay.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Councilmember Rodenberg has a question.
Yeah, it's kind of well known by a lot of longtime residents. That foundation originally put in 1908, and then secondarily put in, I think, 1960. And everyone that's seen it says that it's crumbling. So I don't think you need $100,000 investigation to find out that it's got a crumbling foundation. But that being said, there's always a cost to rebuild that, and is that something that the city's willing to do? I don't know. But I will say that the work done by the consultant on this, in my opinion, was exceptional.
Mhm.
The engineering, the photographs, the explanations. I've never seen such a complete analysis of a building, minus the seismic. So good job, everyone involved. So it helps us make a decision without spending too much more money on any more investigation. So thank you to you guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Adam.
you.
I agree with that. Yes.
Procedurally, council, I just wanted to let you know, I don't believe we indicated this, but today, although we're looking for a recommendation from you, if there is a consensus on a path moving forward, we would prepare that in a resolution format to go to the next regular council meeting so that we can take public comment on whichever, if there is a majority consensus today on a path of action. So that would come to perhaps the following council meeting. I know Josh turned his camera back on. As soon as possible, we would want to get that on the council's agenda for public comment.
Do we have any preliminary results from the survey? Like as to what people are wanting in the park?
Yeah, we do have some preliminary results. We also pulled some partial results last week too, just so we can get a little bit of a heads up. So between last week and this week, I don't know how much things have changed. We just literally closed it. But based on what we heard at the open house, there is certainly an understanding that it's an older building. I think a lot of people who we talked to at the open house recognize that it's got some historical interest to the community. And when you look at the old photos, there's certainly, you know, something about the original schoolhouse and the parts that are still there that the community is interested in and appreciates. There is definitely some community members who feel strongly about the relevancy of the building and the history of the site, even though you can't see a lot of it in today's structure. And that was a lot of discussion about just the need for a space. They would love to have a space to do an arts gallery and community meetings, and just to have a space for the community to actually meet and use in any number of ways, organizations, nonprofits, you know, rental space, etc. I think a lot of that was, you know, is this the right space or not? We really didn't get into that kind of a question. For the online survey, we did not specifically ask any questions on the Masonic Lodge itself. So we really focused on what kinds of uses would you like to see. We had a lot of open-ended questions. People could tell us what ideas they had or what other things they would like us to consider. And some of those open-ended questions did reiterate some of the similar things we heard at the open house. There was not a quantitative question to really gauge any specifics on the lodge and whether it should stay, be removed, be remodeled, be reused. There wasn't a direct question for that on the survey.
We have a little bit of information here that Jennifer can offer in terms of.
Was that flash vote or something else?
It was Survey Monkey, because it was a little more detailed. I actually, is it okay with you, Julia, if I
Yeah.
share the survey that Sheenam had sent over?
Yeah, so this is the raw data from after we close it. It makes it, you can see like the ranking of the various questions that we did ask for the different types of uses. And as you share it, Jennifer, I can explain in more detail if we really want to get into it.
That was kind of the most easy to
Yeah.
read, and I thought we have some other graphics as well that have them ranked in importance, but those are a little.
So the highest on there would be sand volleyball, then tennis, pickleball courts for those that may not be able to see. With trail soft surface as well being very high, restroom and parking facilities being another high indicated use of the park.
We did intentionally not add, and I just want to kind of point this out too. There was no option to just click the button and say, I prefer this. That was save, you know, use the Masonic Lodge or use the space for something different than the Masonic Lodge, right? Indoor facilities and indoor options were not part of what they could select on. So they would have added to it and made comments in the open-ended questions for those that felt strongly enough to give us some input on the building itself.
Okay. Oh, yes, Councilmember Ranger.
Yeah, I appreciate the public's input. All those things up there is certainly something we need in the city, we need more of. However, surveys historically, people taking them don't take into account how much is it gonna cost. And as council members, it's our responsibility to spend the taxpayers' money well. So I think if you would have put a cost factor in there and people cared, I mean, is there something else in the city they'd rather have $2 million spent on? Or can we build a new inexpensive building that complies for a little bit more than $2 million? It would solve those needs. So what the park is going to contain is one thing, the building is another. So I hope council takes into consideration the cost, and when all discussion is finished, I have an opinion. I'll speak to it.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to remind council of something that Jennifer said, that the building is less than 1,800 square feet of usable space on the first floor once it's remodeled as proposed. I did hear when we, the city, opened the building to a group of artists that were interested in using the first floor. They were surprised at how small the interior was on the first floor, and said, no, that really wouldn't work for them because it is so small. Some of them said it would, but most of them were saying that's too small. And then also at the open house, when I was talking with a couple people about Masonic Lodge and what the size was, they were also surprised at how small it actually net usable space was in the first floor. So looking at all that, comparing it on cost per square foot, as you were alluding to, Councilman Rodenberg, that maybe you could do more with less money.
Other comments? I agree with them. So are you looking for us to make direction, or do you have more for the presentation? Or should we go ahead and chat? Yeah, go ahead.
Staff would like direction.
Okay.
Yeah, I am in love with buildings, I really do. And I think that I probably, with the exception of one person in attendance, probably live closer to that building than anyone else in the room. Probably only 200 yards away. I love that building. I've seen pictures of it, historical pictures. But in my opinion, demolition and stop spending money on any more inspection is the way that I would like to see us do. With the caveat that we seriously look at when we decide what's going to be done at that park, we think about building a building that can fulfill indoor needs as an assembly spot.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Quick question, for Juliet, or Jennifer. As part of what Councilmember Rodenberg just indicated, if the council does, provide direction to demolish the structure, would that be an additional question we would seek from the public? And as part of the master plan, if they would like a different structure on that site versus a
Yeah.
sand volleyball or pickleball or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think that certainly is what we would then do. It is probably most important to us to know from the council today if they would agree, if they collectively have consensus to remove the existing building. If, like, as the council member mentioned, there's a desire to consider a possible new building that would serve the needs better in its place, we would then include that as one of the three alternatives that we would then proceed into. So we would show, here's what it would look like if it was pickleball or open space or more parking or, X, Y, and Z. One of those alternatives would include what and where we might put a new building if that was to go back here. And you
And
could
that
even
has
go so
also-
far as to the pros and cons of, is there a better, like, what are the limitations of putting a new building here versus what you could accomplish if you put a new building somewhere else, i.e. size, space, accessible parking, that kind of thing.
And that would have cost estimates as well with all three alternatives.
It would. Cost estimates at this point would be very broad. So you're really talking like on a, X number of square foot per, cost dollars per square foot. We just don't have the budget or the ability in the master plan process to delve into a lot of detail. What I can tell you is your parking is limited on the site and a lot of concerns from parking. And so really one of the biggest limitations of a new structure on this site is the fact that you'd have to then comply with all the current codes from the amount of parking that would be needed based on the size of that assembly space. And I do see a hand up, so I'll pause.
Okay, we can go back to deliberations. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Wong.
Thank
Oh, and Seth.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I didn't see it.
You wanna go to
Forgive
Seth?
me.
You wanna go to Seth?
Sure, Seth, go ahead.
Oh,
Councilmember Seth.
sure. Thank you. The silent hand. Yeah, so I like the idea of exploring, some different options. Of course, I love historical buildings in our area, and it is such a great park there with Crescent Creek. And we've also looked at possibly some enhancement of that park with the covered area, that's been used in the past for a lot of gatherings and such. We've got that great art piece down there, the wood carving from a few years ago, the baseball field, volleyball courts, the dirt bike track. It is a great location. I think part of what we may reconsider is, kind of all the land usage. Of course, fields I think should stay, but I like the idea of pickleball courts and stuff too. But I think it's an awesome spot. It's, at one of our creeks that enters the harbor. And it's a beautiful park. My kids call it Boat Park because of the playground. But I would like to hear the other options, and I think even if we were to demolish the building because of the amount of cost to bring it back to being useful and safe, and it's such a small area, I'd like to see what some of the other options could be to make that a venue, potentially it's for the arts. We've had discussions around.
I think we've lost your audio.
He's singing
Councilmember
again.
Seth.
Community center,
there
and maybe
is.
there's things that will take years to look at too. Hello?
We can.
Oh, I don't know what happened. Okay. Well, can you hear me
Little
now?
bit, yeah.
Oh, no. Okay. Let me try disconnecting my Bluetooth.
Worse.
That's,
Councilmember Storsett, I think we got the gist.
All right, can you hear me now?
yeah, yeah, we can.
Oh, brother, what's going on here? Okay, I think you guys can hear me now. I apologize, Bluetooth headphones. I'll summarize really fast in case I lose you again, but I think this is something that we should potentially look at, demolishing the building, still finding a way to capture, the harbor, the maritime feel, what the Masonic Lodge has been, but it's such a great park, everything that connects there from the baseball field, the tennis courts, the basketball court, the grass, the covered area near the creek that we want to hopefully bring back to be able to be used on a regular basis. But I think it's a great opportunity, but probably something we look at of what's feasible down the line as far as our budget goes. That's, I guess, where I stand. But I look forward to seeing more on the options and costs.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Storsett. Okay, Councilmember Wolf and Councilmember Barber both have their, go ahead, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you. So, this is not a historic building, I guess, or not enough of a historic building. So I'm also in a belief that maybe we should look at the demolishing of this. And I'd like to see when we talk about demolishing, is there enough room to have a building and keep the volleyball courts? I mean, I think we've heard from a lot of folks that volleyball is important. Pickleball is going to be in Gig Harbor North, but volleyball, I think I'd like to see if there's still some space for having some athletic sports there. And I think when we get around to looking at the bond, I don't think this building is on the bond possibilities. Am I correct or incorrect?
You're correct, because the list that we were providing, we had not yet had this discussion,
Okay,
and so we don't want to preclude a council action.
okay. So then this could perhaps be a bond issue
It's something that could be
for discussion.
added for discussion.
For discussion, okay. And I know that we're also going to discuss as far as the house on Soundview as well as a possible bond issue. So, yeah, but I'm as sad as I am to see this building go financially, it's not historic, and financially it seems to make better sense to see what else can go in that space. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember Barber.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience.
I support the comments that have already been made about demolishing. I would like to see in Crescent Creek Park in the master plan, I'd like to see some sort of recognition of the historic significance of the house that used to, or the lodge that used to be there. Maybe Lucy Goodman, I leave it to you guys to recommend how that happens. But I do think that we need some sort of recognition of the past.
Yeah.
Because that's important also.
We had talked about that as staff. Jeff and I had talked about, and Jennifer had talked about that, and we are forming the Historic Preservation Commission coming up very soon, and so that could be a project. And also we partner often with the Harbor History Museum, who knows a great deal about the area and the building. So those are two options to do what you're asking.
Including the entry to the Masonic Lodge as it sits today is not necessarily the exact entry that was used for the historic Crescent Valley School, but it has very similar. I don't know, Rich, if you want to say what's really different, but it looks the same, but it's not really the historic entrance. But you could replicate that in some way, shape, or form on any future building.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna call myself, so. I agree with everything that's been said. I think price per square foot, just looking at, that's just to get it up to snuff. And then that doesn't even include the additional work that potentially could be needed. So it just is too much, and with the asbestos and the mold and the lead and the children, I have concerns. I agree also with doing some type of historic marker. I was actually even thinking, could we have an art project or a sculpture or, something to remember? I know this is Gig Harbor. I believe it's the first park of Gig Harbor. And so- yeah, first city park. So we could do some type of recognition and, those type projects. We could look at an LTAC grant or, and award that, and people could create an art sculpture or something. So I think there's creative ideas, and I I think we should look at the date of what the city wants, have the public comment at the upcoming meeting, and then go from there with what we decide to do.
And it also would be worth consulting with the tribe, because as I understand, and Jennifer Keating is on our like notification list,
Terrific.
but they had a women's village, that was the site of a women's village.
Yeah, so maybe multiple opportunities for recognition. So yes, Councilmember Wall.
Do we need to talk about the size of building, or are you going to, are our consultants going to recommend the size of the building that maybe should be there?
I believe that based off, there's a lot, the survey will close, there's more public comment to come, and it sounds like there'll be 3 alternatives brought forward to council for discussion. And in that time, staff can discuss, you know, if there is a structure, if there's going to be a proposed structure, what that would look like and how much space.
Okay.
Juliet had a comment.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Juliet, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to kind of get clarity, since a lot of discussion has been, at least to date, in favor of demolishing the building. One thing it would be nice to get some direction on, as well as we go into some costing elements of this project. There's been some discussion in the past about potentially reusing some elements. There's some beautiful like old growth timber in the building. It does cost more to salvage some of those elements for reuse on the site. If that is something we want to at least leave the door open to, we would include it in our estimate. So I'd love to hear at least a little bit if there's worth a little extra cost to salvage some, not all. We wouldn't dismantle the entire building by hand. But if there's an interest in sustainability of reuse, we could salvage some elements and figure out something interesting to do with them.
Okay, great, thank you. 2 council members have their hand up. Councilmember Barber.
Yes, I will. I'm glad that you raised that, Juliet, and I will speak for myself and also for Councilmember Henderson, who is somewhere in the air, or the Chicago airport. And I am interested in your recommendations as far as reuse of some pieces of the building. But we need to weigh the costs and those kinds of things, which you are doing. But I think if there is a way to reuse pieces of it, and that may incorporate into the historical recognition as well, I think that makes sense to do it.
Councilmember Rother.
Yeah, there's kind of a raised platform stage almost in there. And there's seating on the sides that would probably could be adapted to a multi-use building that we would build later. So I'm in favor also of looking at and weighing the cost
Right.
of what it would take to incorporate that in a new building.
Okay, Jeff, you had a comment?
Just as part of the document that's prepared for the final master plan and related to the Masonic Lodge itself, we could include some cost estimating for how much it would be to use or reuse some of those materials, whether that's storage, if it's demolished sooner or later, we can figure out how much that would be and provide that as part of the report.
Great, is there a consensus? that
Yeah.
people- Yeah, I think so. Okay, great, thank you.
If there is, sorry, I should have raised my hand. I apologize.
You don't-
I just want to kind of open the floor for a minute, if we have just a couple more minutes, for Rich, I think is in the room. Rich is our architect who did some of the research on assembly and space and size and what needed to happen to it. I think I've heard that there's an interest in considering what a new building on this site might look like. Rich, is there anything you're aware of in some of the research that you've done in the past that would just preclude the feasibility of a size of a building that would actually serve like a larger assembly use? I don't want to kind of, in conscientious of the dollars we're spending on this, I don't want to spend a lot of time master planning where the building could look like and how big it might want to be if there's something immediately that Rich has done or as part of his research might. I just want to give him space to see if there's any sort of additional information we should have.
Yeah, I don't see anything that, I mean, I think you may have mentioned it earlier about the parking for a facility, the required parking for a facility and how much, land you really have to accommodate that. That might be a dictating factor. Yeah, I can't really think of any other
Okay,
limiting factors other than space.
thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember.
Juliet mentioned what it might look like. I mean, I guess she means visually. Since I really like the architecture of the rest of that park that's old WCW or whatever that is. And I'd like to see, I don't want to see a concrete building or a steel building or anything like, I'd like to see something that replicated that kind of architecture. I know that's a little bit more expensive to put those design elements in something, but I think that park deserves it.
Got it. Thank you.
I believe that staff has what they need on this.
Okay, great. And we're,
Appreciate the discussion.
okay, thank you all for attending online as well. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, bye. And so we go on to topic number 2, the conservation area naming recommendation. And again, it's our project manager, Carolyn. So I'll let you go ahead and present. Oh,
I wasn't sure if we were adjusting the agenda. We do have Stephanie that had to be before. I know there was a request, and I'm just not sure if that agenda got adjusted for number 4 to be moved to number 2.
if that's,
Is it possible to adjust that?
It's up to the mayor pro tem and the council members.
does council agree?
Yes,
Okay, all right, so, item number 2 is now the wastewater comprehensive plan technical amendment, Mallard Landing Lot 7 and Harbor Run. And our presentation will be by Public Works Director Jeff Langham.
Thank you. I'm actually, as our wastewater superintendent, Chair, if you could come up here and we have. I'm gonna hand it over actually just to Stephanie right now, because she's gonna make a full press. Stephanie's been working with a consultant on the technical memo related to this side, and she can probably give you the best information.
So yes, thank you. So we're here today looking at 2 technical amendments to our wastewater comp plan for Harbor Run, which is a preliminary plat in the county on Peacock Hill, but within our sewer. Number 2. So they have requested to reroute sewer from Basin 2 north of them into Basin 3. Now, all of the sewer within the city eventually makes it to Basin 3, but this would be taking it in and would if they had gone all the way to Basin 2. So that's the first technical amendment. The second one is Mallard Landing Lot 7 for senior living down on 72nd.
Wagner Way.
Wagner Way.
Yeah.
They are in Basin 14. They are requesting to rerun the existing force main from Basin 14 that currently runs north. They're proposing to shorten it and dump it into Basin 21. This helps the city in that Basin 14 right now, the lift station has capacity issues and ragging issues, which will let Chuck run into more. And by reducing the force main that it has to pump through to get to gravity, it helps with our capacity issues. We have run the model and confirmed it. They both do pass and don't have any issues downstream. If this proposal is passed by council. It would just, and then if passed, and adopted, we would amend the maps and later.
Any questions from council? Go ahead, Councilmember Barbara. Oh, sorry.
They're repeating it.
No,
Okay, yeah, like,
I don't, based on also the way that you presented it today, Stephanie, I don't have a problem with either of these proposals. I'm a little concerned, I'll say, about the capacity problems that are mentioned in the memo. And will this address those capacity problems, or do we need to do something else later on that is not part of this memo to address that?
The capacity of lift station 14.
The Mallard Landing one. Yeah.
Let's go there 14.
Yeah.
Can you answer that one?
So when this project initially was brought up to us, we had mentioned to the developer that the capacity issues were a problem and that our pumps just would not be able to take the additional load. So in our discussions with them, we had told them, we're looking at possibly doing this, to bring this capacity issue to resolve that. Their recommendation that when they looked at it was to shorten the force main. So the force main right now, I think, is in the neighborhood of 4,500 to 5,000 feet long, and they want to basically cut that in half. So by them cutting that in half and reducing that restriction and that head loss for the pumps, that will give us the capacity and allow those pumps to pump more by reducing the length of that force main. So
Okay.
by them being able to do that and turn into 72nd Street, or actually, we had an idea of shortening it even a little bit more, going into the street above. I don't remember the name of the street offhand.
Yeah, I don't.
I see.
Anyways,
Jeff has a map.
That's seven.
So,
yeah, just to the east of 72nd there.
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I can't.
So as had, we can increase his capacity.
But it would increase the
Right
pumping
now, they're
capacity.
proposing to shorten it from all this, they can move all this in here. And we're also thinking maybe it might go to here. But it removes half of the force main that 14
Okay.
is pumping right now.
So when you lower, physics behind it is when you lower the amount of friction because of the pipe, the more volume you can get through with the same pump. So
Okay.
it shortening that pipe increases our capacity at the lift station.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Wook and then Councilmember Rhoda.
Thank you. I have a question about the one on Peacock Hill.
Mhm.
Is that in the city limits or is that in the county?
That is in what we call the county bubble, it's a parcel that's in the county, but for the county to approve it. They need to be able to be served by sewer by the city, because is within our service. for sewer.
So it's in the UGA.
Oh, it's in the GIS.
So if this doesn't happen, then these projects won't go forward.
Yeah, my understanding is if they don't connect to our city sewer, they could very well just go on to onsite septic.
And so what are the ramifications of that? Any ramifications of that?
Well, depends on, it's on-site septics are often known to shut down shellfish areas because they, at some point in their lives, begin to leach into creeks, which I brought up the map for this proposed compound amendment. Crescent Creek is right down here. So if at some point this plat does have on-site septics and those septics begin to fail, they will discharge nutrients directly into Crescent Creek, which goes right into the harbor. So that is, in my opinion, a downside to having on-site septics.
Okay, any other downside?
Well, there's a benefit to the city on this proposed compound amendment because, or technical amendment, because by approving this technical amendment, we would be reducing the future demand on lift station 2. As Stephanie was saying, it doesn't increase the demand on lift station 3 because lift station 3 is receiving all the sewer in the city anyway. But it would reduce the future demands on lift station 2. So there's a benefit to that.
Okay, and the homeowners, I guess, or would be paying rate and half? Because they're in the UGA.
As long as they're in the urban growth area and that policy in code doesn't change, correct, these homeowners will be paying 1.5 times the in-city rate.
All right, thank you very much.
Councilmember Rhoda.
Is it staff's recommendation for council to approve both these amendments?
Yes, we are different. We don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. On either one of these.
That sounds like environmentally. It's better to have them, especially the one on Peacock. So that we don't have any environmental issues. Thank you.
I'm in favor of both
Yeah.
of those amendments.
I am.
I support that. I support those.
Any online comments? Okay. So do you have what you need?
We do. From this, we will prepare a resolution for each and present that to council at an upcoming council meeting. And at that point, the public will have the opportunity to speak.
All right. And why don't we go on, we'll go to the conservation area naming recommendations. And then maybe after this discussion, we can take a short break. Okay, go ahead, Jennifer.
Right. See. Share the screen. So at this month's Parks Commission meeting, we had a discussion about the possible names for what has been referred to as North Creek Salmon Heritage Area or North Creek Properties, the three phases of the conservation properties. So we had opened for about a month a form where they could submit, or where the public could submit names, and these are the ones that we received. As well as letters from the Gig Harbor Land Conservation Fund. As you can see, the most commonly mentioned one was Pollicott, or some variation of Pollicott Conservation Area, or conservation site, or just that name itself. So we had a good discussion. Stephanie Lyle is on the Parks Commission, was there, and also very well knows the history of the area. So that was the recommendation number one, and they went ahead and recommended two for your consideration. The other one is Donkey Creek Reserve, feeling that respects the history of the logging and the sawmill and all of that had been on that area. So they are submitting those to you for your consideration. And if you decide on one of those, or you could go your own way and pick a different one, but we can prepare a resolution for a future meeting based on what you decide.
Okay, great. Councilmember Burton.
I'm in favor of the Pollicott Conservation Area. I think further recognition of the original inhabitants of our area is important. And I think it really speaks to what we've been talking about doing on the Parks Commission, and then here, since I've been involved, we still will retain Donkey Creek Park too, which is, in my opinion, a wonderful opportunity to tell some more history of our logging history as well. So I am in favor of Pollicott.
And I'm in favor of Pollicott.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
I'm not in favor of Walcott. There's a lot of things already having that kind of heritage recorded to. However, I'd like to see just Donkey Creek Reserve, but I just noticed one up there that makes a lot of sense. It's North Creek Heritage. I see it up there. Yeah, it contains the word heritage, so it can cover both Donkey Creek and our early Croatian and Swedish settlers, as well as the tribe. So I would rather have something that compromised than to turn it one way or another.
So, I'll call, I see Seth, yes. Councilmember.
Can you guys hear?
Swartz.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I like the idea of somehow capturing both in some way. And I think we can do that as we've done with some of the other parks as well. So I prefer joining the two rather than having one area called Donkey Creek and one being associated with the tribe who inhabited the area before. So a way of kind of merging both histories is what I'd prefer. I don't have like one of those names that's popping out to me, but I would like a combination.
I see the one, I can speak, I see the one I was mentioning,
Okay.
North Creek Heritage Park. That doesn't necessarily call out the tribe and doesn't necessarily call out Donkey Creek, but it does mention heritage. And we could, on signage and stuff, we could address both of those kinds of things in the park.
Yeah, is it potential that we could do something, where council could narrow it down, make nominations, for example, and then put it out to the community, for more feedback and direction, not necessarily just a vote, but for more feedback, I think would be great.
I'm gonna call on myself.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, calling yourself. Yes.
Thank you, Seth. Are you sure you're done? Because we can hear you.
No, I'm good. I want to hear from you. Thanks.
Okay. I agree with Councilmember Storsett. I was thinking about, is there a way we can merge both names, like something like Donkey Creek Preserve at the Twalcott? And forgive me if I say that incorrectly, conservation area, or doing some type of merger to recognize both. But I also like the idea of putting it out. Maybe, I don't know, if this would be a case where we could use splash vote or something, or, even have a public comment period, or how that would work. But I think it might be great just to, vote on the top two or something like that. But I do definitely want the tribe included as well, so. Yeah. Does that give you, go ahead, Councilmember Farmer?
I like the idea of doing a flash vote. I think it's important with a flash vote that it say, this is why we're suggesting these. So that people aren't just looking at the name, but they know that we're suggesting Twalcott at Donkey Creek or whatever it ends up being, because we want to incorporate both, or because we, whatever reasons we write. I think that it's important to explain to people what they're voting on.
So should we bring back like 4 suggestions, 3 or 4,
Maybe,
for you to group and have to go out for a vote?
yeah, Councilmember Wood.
No, I agree, except that I don't think that area is Donkey Creek, it's more North Creek.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we're trying to call that area now, because it's identified with the state and the county is North Creek?
Locally, it has been known as Donkey Creek since European settlement.
Right. So, but I thought on the maps and things it's called North Creek.
It is on the maps. It's called North Creek for the federal grants and everything else. We call it North Creek so that it's very clear that that's the creek that our. There's nothing wrong, I don't think, with using park names or naming of an area to call it Donkey Creek.
Vernacular, what everyone calls it.
North Donkey Creek.
No. But I like the 2 names. I like Twalcott and then either Donkey Creek at Donkey Creek Preserve or something, but I do really prefer the Twalcott with, and I'm okay with naming it maybe at the, or maybe Twalcott at Donkey Creek Heritage Preserve, something like that.
And if we do go forward with the Twalcott, that I know, I saw in the letter, I believe, from the tribe, that they offered to do some more interpretive voice boxes, signage, and if we're looking at, if we end up doing the trail, depending on this afternoon's conversation, like through there, maybe we could incorporate some of those elements of both histories into the project. Yes, great.
I think if you put the word Twalcott in it, it specifies the tribe and the other heritages are lost. So I think just the word heritage, anybody can claim it. The tribe can claim it. Croatians can claim it, Swedes can claim it. I can claim it. It just, I just like to see it heritage on. My opinion, if one of those, we could have 1 out of 4.
Any other comments?
North Creek Heritage Park.
I feel like
really want Twalcott.
I really do want Twalcott in there too.
So do I.
So if we were to do a flash vote, would you want the 2? So we have North Creek Heritage Park. I always say it wrong.
Twalcott.
There we go. Okay, so Donkey Creek Preserve at Twalcott Estuary, and then Twalcott. Would those be the 3?
What are they again?
Like the one would be just standalone Native American name,
Okay.
The second would be Donkey Creek Preserve at the Twalcott Estuary. And the third would be North Creek Heritage Park.
What if we did 12 Cup Heritage Park? And then the third one, so we have two with Heritage Park, because I agree with what Lee is saying about heritage being more encompassing.
Well, you just said Walcott Heritage, so it excludes everyone else.
I like
I don't-
Walcott Conservation Area that's recommended up there, and I think wordsmithing, including Donkey Creek, Heritage, North Creek, whatever you want to, do. I mean, I think just so long as we kind of get a few options that include both, and then have, if you like, Councilmember Rodenberg's option as well.
North Creek Heritage Park.
Okay, so Twalcott Conservation Area, Donkey Creek Preserve at Twalcott Estuary, and North Creek Heritage Park.
So is Walcott an estuary? Is it an estuary? What is the proper?
Yes,
Yes.
what's already there?
They have
Walcott Estuary.
conservation area.
No,
is
the,
what's recommended.
what, the way that they worded it, the donkey, the one that has the word estuary in it, the estuary is named. The estuary that is near Austin Park is named Twalcott Estuary. And Austin Park is Austin Park at Twalcott Estuary.
So this would be.
This isn't
Donkey
really at that
Creek.
estuary.
To-
But
to-
that's what,
This
I'm not
doesn't
sure
have
that
the
this is
estuary,
tied to
I
the
know.
estuary.
Yeah, Katrina, I inserted the word estuary, and I don't think this includes the estuary, this is a.
Somebody mentioned estuary, that's what I wrote down. But-
Yeah, right.
Scratch that out.
So we just want direction on if council's directing us to do a flash vote, we want to know which names you're wanting to do. Otherwise, if there's a majority name, we can put that forward on a resolution and bring it forward for public comment.
Well, there's three of us here that think that want Walcott in there. And I think some of us want Walcott at Donkey Creek. Something or another.
Councilmember Storsett, so said.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, what Jenny just said on the second one. I still, as many times as I've heard it, can't repronounce it, but I like the idea of the tribe at Donkey Creek. I think it's a good combination. Donkey Creek runs through much of it. I think that's what people know it as. And we'll do more to educate people on the other names and what's existed there before. So this is a shift and adjustment. So I don't want to see Donkey Creek be left out of it.
I
Thanks.
can go with that too.
Yeah.
I concur with that, so maybe we do have a consensus with that.
The city clerk has his.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Josh. City Clerk Stecker, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to weigh in real quickly on flash vote. I'm not entirely convinced that this is the right platform to use the flash vote survey. When you put out several options and ask people to vote on them, you're going to get a result, and there may be some consternation if City Council ultimately decides they don't want to go with the result of the vote. So flash vote is better suited for getting people's opinions and ideas, but if you're putting a question to them, it's almost taking the council's decision out of their hands and putting it in the hands of the public, which isn't necessarily how this process should work, I think.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you. Councilmember Storsett also has his hand. Thanks, thanks City Clerk Stecker for that clarification. Appreciate it. Okay, Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, I was in agreement with Josh's question. I was kind of a little unsure on how we would do the flash vote on this. I think, of course, we're seeking feedback, but we're looking for more of a qualitative, I think, versus quantitative. Not just a, hey, 60% say this, and I think looking for more feedback and just more of a sense of what do you think of these names, and does this fit what our community wants, versus just a hard decision on a few options. So I agree.
Great, thank you. City
If-
Clerk Stecker. you
Yeah,
have your hand
if I
up?
can jump back in, I can speak to this issue and also the Masonic Lodge that we talked about earlier, but our plan right now is to go to release the gigabyte tomorrow and let the community know what the decision is from council on this and on the Masonic Lodge, and make them aware of that we're coming back to a council meeting with action to be taken and that we're going to be taking public comment. and really encouraging people to reach out and be there and let us know what they think about these decisions. So we're ready to hit the ground running after this meeting to get the word out there on that. And I think we'll get some good feedback there.
Okay, great. Councilmember Wolf.
So maybe Twalcott Conservation Area at Donkey Creek, is that what you have?
That's what someone said, that it was the last one, I think it was Councilmember Storsett.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
I like
Yeah,
that too.
I like that too.
Okay.
So we've
Seth
got
still has his
consent.
hand up.
Oh, Seth, your hand's up again?
You got that?
No.
There.
No, my arm is not tired. I'm good. No, my hand should be down. Thanks.
Okay, glad to hear it. Okay. All right, so
Got
you have what you need, you got it?
Yes, and so just as city clerk said, we'll bring this back with resolution. It'll be noticed for public comment and we'll take public comment on this, and then if council
Great,
can either affirm your recommendation today or change that.
okay. Any other discussion? Comments? Okay, so can we take a 5-minute break? The time is 4:03. We'll come back around 4:08. Okay. Keep up the recording. Welcome back to the Gig Harbor City Council study session, Thursday, May 11th. We returned from a break. The time is 4:13. And our next, and our last discussion item is number 4, Parks Bond Projects, and Finance Director Dave Rodenbach.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah.
This is just a simple discussion to come up with a menu of potential projects for potential loaded bonds, should council decide to go in that direction. So it's not to discuss if we're gonna go to a bond. It's just to come up with the projects, should we do a bond.
Could you give a summary of which bond is expiring? And
Okay.
about, I believe in the staff memo, it mentioned a $10 million and what that would cost. Do you have-
Sure. The whole theory behind this is the 2005 Ed and Boat bonds are expiring this year. This is the last tax going to be collected from the taxpayers. And that's going to be at 6.5 cents per $1,000 of assessed valuation. And the thought just occurred, these bonds, when they were first approved, the taxpayers levied, I think, 15 cents per $1,000 on their bonds, and they go down over time because the assessed value in the city is going up. So it's an inverse relationship. And so the thought came, would the citizens be amenable to replacing this tax with another one to get some hard to build bond projects accomplished? And so that's where this whole thing came out. And so we asked our bond, not our bond counsel, our bond underwriter, our financial advisor, D.A. Davidson, Dave Trexler, we asked him to come up with that quick bond presentation you saw, and we're using those same numbers that you saw in that presentation for this. Those will certainly change. When we go to do this, those will change, but we're kind of in the ballpark. And so what we have is, we went with a 20-year bond. He gave 3 different bonds, I think a 10, a 20, and a 30. The most common bond is 20 years, like the Ed and Boat bond was 20 years. You know, we sold it in 25, and I know it's not exact, but we're paying it off in 24. Okay, so that's 20 years. And so we looked at 20 years, and on a 20-year, given the scenario that Dave Trageser gave us, if you'll see, I believe in the second paragraph, for example, 10 million, it's like the last sentence, 20-year bond. The levy rates range from 13 cents to 7 cents. So 13 cents in the initial years. And based on our projections, it would go down to 7 cents. And that pretty much is a given that that's going to happen. If that doesn't happen, your property values are showing a 20-year sustained decline. And I can't say that would never happen in Gig Harbor, but the history I can track, it's never happened. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at as far as the funding and the financing. And I think based on our timing where we are today, if the city were to do a bond, we're looking at the November election.
Okay. And wasn't it a July, I believe, deadline for us to have decisions on? Jennifer, do you want to speak?
August 1st, we would have to have a resolution submitted to the Pierce County Auditor.
Okay.
And that's why we're here today, to start to talk about the projects that are either known through the pros plan that was recently adopted, or current projects that are underway for council's decision. Depending on what it is that you're wanting to fund, we will then go back, Dave will go back to our bond folks and pull together options for consideration. We do have one more time after this to speak with council about potential projects prior to where we're going to ask for a finalization. So today, with the list that has been prepared by our fine staff, we were asking council to talk through those, if there's any additional information that you all would need, or to see if there's a general consensus of how we should move forward.
Okay, great. Can you share? Oh, it is, there it is, magic.
Arts only.
Yes, part one.
Okay, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you. So, do we know what's happening with the Y? And phase one?
We currently, what we know based on our conversations with them is that they've raised $1.3 million. Of a $7 million low end portion of phase 1A.
So,
Jesse Palmer is, I see, online, and so he may be available to more fully answer that question.
Should we see if Mr. Palmer? Yes, I just.
Tiffany allowed him, so he has to accept it.
Okay.
So maybe we can check back with him too, but what was presented at a meeting Jennifer was at earlier this week was 1.3 million of the 7 million.
And actually, yeah, and we had put 8 million, just thinking of inflation, but they had recently had it revalued and it was at 7 million.
okay.
So haven't gone up too much.
And that's for 1A. Okay. You had your hand up?
Yeah.
Councilmember Braga.
I'm wondering, I have two questions. One is if you could detail what the process is. I know we have the August 1 deadline of going to Pierce County. But do we need to have a public hearing about this, or do we make the decision, pass an ordinance, and then it happens? And then the second question that I have is probably more for Dave, and that is, if we were to replace the Ed and Boat bond, how much could we put on that bond without increasing the amount that a taxpayer pays? So those are my two questions.
To keep you're talking, what you're really asking is, can we keep the rate at 6.5%? Because that's what everybody's paying right now, correct?
Okay, yeah,
Not much. I don't have a number right off
He
the
can
top.
get that back to you.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't have it off the top of my head. It'd be a pretty wild guess. What I'm doing right now, though, to help you, you're gonna get in the ballpark doing this. If 10 million is. I'll just get back to you. It's, yeah.
So
I'll send an email out and I'll nail this down.
I think he said the last meeting would be between 5 and 6 million,
okay,
but we'll get back to you on the exact of that. And of course, depending on the length of bond that you're wanting to consider. And vote was 20-year bonds. If you go to 30, you can extend that out further for cost, but we'll get that back to you.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And could you look at like actual costs, how much it would, so based on the percentage, for example, you were mentioning the 10 million initially starting out somewhere in the range of 13 cents per thousand, so that would be 1,300. So we could take the average house and have some numbers associated with that.
Yes, and
Okay.
part of this is we want to see kind of what scale it is that the council would like to go forward with a bond. If you choose $3 million, right, we would go back and calculate what that is. So if there's different options that you'd like us to look at, maybe if there was a 6 million, 10 million, 15 million, we could then go back to our bond folks and provide you what that would be for the average household. Talk, how does that compare with the Ed and Boat bonds that are expiring? But Dave, if I'm correct, the 13 cents would be based on our today's valuation, and then as our city grows and assessed value, that total tax burden would decrease as we have more assessed value within the city.
Right, okay. That'd be helpful too. Yes, Councilmember Wolf.
So we have to, it's in order to get all of our citizens to vote on a bond, it's good to give everybody a little something that they love and they want to check that box for. So we had a little bit of a discussion about the Masonic Lodge, but it's not on here.
It's actually down
Oh,
at
it's
the
not on
bottom
there,
line.
I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Oh, it is on there, I see it. Okay, that's $4 million. Okay, well, that's on here, then that's good. boy, this, we have some discussions to do to get, to find out what our citizens, with the cross section of, and we need 60% of the vote, right?
Yes.
We need to find out something that 60% of voters will vote for.
Very well put.
And so what our bond folks have generally spoken of is we want to make it as appealing to the voters as possible. Of course, with projects that we've already contemplated in our pros plan. So this is all of the projects within the pros plan were supported by the community through the adoption of that. So we are taking these projects from the adopted list. One thing to consider with the Masonic Lodge, as Jennifer and Juliet explained, we've now noted that we would like to demolish the Masonic Lodge, so that's a now known. However, the further public comment will come as far as what do you want the park to be? And so if we put on the bond that we would need to know in August that we are gonna have a $4.5 million structure, and the community ends up saying through this outreach that they want sand volleyball courts or pickleball courts or whatever that is, then we may have an inconsistent master plan with what we have adopted on the bond.
Got it. Got it. And we don't know what size $4.5 million is gonna give us in that building there, right?
It would be
You know,
Jeff,
it's a $3.2 million construction project, just to be clear, so, yeah, we could have a rough estimate, but it's gonna be a few thousand square feet,
A few thousand,
yeah,
so probably 3,000-4,000.
3,000 or 4,000 seems about reasonable.
And how about the Soundview House? Either the renovation or demolishing, what size are we looking at there?
Well, it's probably in that same realm. The Soundview House, again, that's a residential site right now. It's not developed already in the same way that the Masonic Lodge site is developed. So the parking, to do parking at Soundview House would cost quite a bit more money, including your stormwater needs. And the site for the, let's see, I just looked that up, site for the stormwater house is about 7/10 of an acre. The site for Masonic Lodge is about 1.1 acre. So you have more room to do more improvements, and that makes it easier. If you start doing compact stormwater requirements on something like the Soundview House, you have to put stormwater facilities underground, and that really raises your price of your.
Okay, that's really helpful in trying to come up with these ideas of things. It almost sounds like we get more bang with our buck, trying to build or rebuild Masonic in the Masonic Lodge area. And yet, what if our citizens don't want a building there, they want volleyball courts?
And there is the parking issue.
But we have more parking there than we do on the Soundview House.
That's correct, if you're just looking at an assembly building, but if you are looking at parking for more volleyball or the park itself, then do you want to have, I think what Jennifer was saying is, do you want to have parking allocated for Masonic Lodge replacing the building, or allocated for the park use out beyond the replacement building?
part of what we're hearing from the Crescent Creek plan is that there's not adequate parking currently for the population that we're serving. So whichever uses the council decides to add into that in that space, or however that master plan goes, we're going to have to better accommodate parking on that site. I believe is what Joe.
Yes.
I'm gonna call on myself. So when we're looking at a structure, like a community building or something for the Masonic Lodge, it seems like I've heard multiple things thrown out. I've heard something for seniors, permanent home for senior center. I've heard a community center, where people can have youth activities, and I've heard a place for groups and artists and others to come together. I feel like before we can recommend one of these projects, almost among council and staff, we need to define what it is we're trying to accomplish. Do we want a large area, these are both in the view border, do they need to be on the bus line? There's all kinds of considerations. I know that the senior center needs assessment is coming out, I believe you said mid-June, and looking at where that is. So we've got all these rotating cards, but where you know, what are we hearing is the goal? So what do we think?
Those are really good points, and we've had really great meetings with Penn Met Parks regarding their senior center feasibility study that I believe Councilmember Rodenberg, you are the city's representative on that. And so they are actively looking at not only location, various locations for a senior center, but how big should it be? How best to put folks to be transported there? What type of uses should there be? And so, as a city, we really look forward to that, to the results of that, to see how we can potentially partner with folks to create a senior center, permanent senior center. You're right, we will have that in mid-June.
Okay.
With that, and I just say this for council's consideration, not intending to lead in any way, but we do know from our community that we regularly hear from that their youth sports, obviously you've heard from them, that there's a strong desire for youth sports, and we've heard that through the CROWS plan as well. Our community has a very strong desire for historic preservation, and we've talked about Historic Preservation Commission coming up, and so that's why as staff, when we're talking about this list, the Wilkinson Barn tends to pique the interest because we've been looking at potentially rehabilitating that barn, which then we could then go to public. Do you want it to be for public use or what is that? But right now it's a historic structure that's on our local register that is in need of rehabilitation and a potential place for future potential meeting space or event space or something of that nature. So youth sports has definitely been a theme. Historic preservation is highly prevalent in our community that may not have had so much attention lately. And then trails were also very highly identified within the CROWS plan. And so there's at least two, I think, trail options on here. One of them would be the trail that is, the Cushman Trail Phase 5 is on here, and we do have that. I can't remember what study that was, but that would bring the Cushman Trail across Oregon up to the hospital, which a lot of people use the Cushman Trail. The other one, I believe, is the connector from the Cushman Trail down to downtown, which since I was parks manager however long ago, it has been a consistent theme. So
With Wilkinson Barn.
So from a staff perspective, youth sports, the historic preservation component, and trails are kind of a key theme that we have heard from the community recurring. And so we would just offer that feedback, not in a leading way, but just in a kind of to summarize the key things that we've heard.
And, oh, yeah, it looks like there's a couple of people with hands up. Yeah, I don't know who was first, either Seth or Roger. Why don't we go with Seth?
All right, testing audio again. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's so many great projects on here. I do like there's a spread, and I wouldn't say that I have a firm opinion on. I think 3 projects is probably the best idea. How that's divvied up. It's hard, and hopefully within our budget we can find things to address throughout the next couple of years. But
Oh, no.
We lost your audio, Councilmember Storseth.
I really lean towards what we can do.
All right, switching off. I should have planned for that. Okay, so you can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, thank you guys. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's a shuttle day. So, okay, so I like all these ideas. I can't narrow it down to 3. I think 3 is the right idea. I look for other council members and for community to weigh in on this at some point before we get to the bond phase. But I'd really like to see us. I know in my mind and hearing from our community that the parks are a very big one as for the sports complex, and to see that through. We talked a little bit about that earlier. I think there could be, a need for us, there. Just obviously the YMCA is an incredible partner, and so grateful to have them. But there could be, there's definitely going to be a need there to see it through. I do believe that our community will also rise up to it besides just the bond. I hope to see everything from large donations to small donations. And the amount of time I spend out with our sports teams and on our fields, it's what I'm asked about the most. Additionally to that, I think the heritage side of it, we talked about the city park and the Masonic Lodge. Obviously, I think what we established today was, that building's probably not what we need in the long term. But the Wilkinson's farm, that is awesome. And it's not something that we can wait on either to be able to maintain. The longer we wait for that, the more it's going to cost us to hold up. And it's so cool. It's just, it's slightly out of downtown, I call it, and such a great connection on the Cushman trails. There's also two great options on trails. There's connecting downtown, which I think is a huge need. And I wonder what we could do with the other land that we've acquired, and speaking to trails in that area, of how to bring people from the Cushman Trail into downtown and make that call that the Y in the road. Do I keep going? Do I go to St. Anthony's and beyond, or to St. Anthony's? Or do I head downtown? So I think those are good options. I think we have to really look at our needs of the community, what our budget is, what can we truly afford as we've laid out our plan. And, I know we're always looking far ahead, but looking at the 25-26 plan as well for the budget. So for me, biggest thing would be Wilkinson's farm and the sports complex. And I want to hear from other council members and what they're hearing in the community. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Henderson,
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
we can.
Yes.
Oh, good, thanks. Do you have any information on the Gig Harbor North Trails? I've seen that for quite a long time, and I'm not sure if we really know what that is.
Yeah, Jeff can speak to that.
Yes, so it is a little nebulous, but there are a series of trails that could be developed or enhanced in Gig Harbor North, in and around the wetlands that are south of Heron's Key, east of Swiftwater Elementary, in those wetlands, and then connect that trail system to the Cushman Trail on the other side of Harbor Hill Drive. And then there's, I believe, another small set of trail systems that is just south of the wetlands. That is not the North Creek Salmon Conservation Heritage Site that we're talking about naming. But it's mostly just those trails in and around the wetland. Previous administration had also included in their trails in and around McCormick Creek, where it flows under Woodhill Drive and up towards Henderson Bay, but those have been separated a little bit. So it's mostly those trails that we're talking about in and around Gig Harbor.
So based on that, do you think the 75,000 is a relatively accurate estimate?
Yes, just because it's enhancement of existing trails. Those trails that I'm referring to are not the city's trails. There is an ability for the city to take over those trails. But right now, some of those trails are not the city's trails, and then it's just further connecting sidewalks to make them signed so that you can connect a trail, and then to go through. I mean, a big area you would need to cross is essentially from Harbor Hill Drive to get over to the other side where Cushman Trail is located. So you can walk there, but there's not a signed trail, and it's not established as a city trail.
I was just gonna add, I walked those trails, I walked them this morning. They're just outside of, the water retention pond right there next to Heron's Key, and it's a beautiful area. And it is part of that preserve. It's actually in pretty good shape, but I could see how signage and making it aware, it's just something we all know living up there. We know these trails are there and they're beautiful. Yeah, it is a pretty low cost, I would imagine that much. So, and they already almost connect to the Cushman Trail. You just go down the hill.
you can today walk from these trails to the Cushman Trail, but you have to walk through areas like the phase 3 of the sports complex is one way to get there, and then walk through phase 2 of the sports complex. You can't, get- yes, yeah, you can't get there. It's just not established.
Okay, does that answer your question? Oh, he's off. Okay, I'm not sure who.
Oh,
Okay, all right, Lee, or Councilmember Brennan.
Yeah, I personally like to see us complete something. We've done a really good job in the last couple of years of completing a lot of projects that have been started and stagnated for some reason. And I see some projects that need just a little bit more money, or they don't need a lot of money to come to completion. The idea of going over Morgan and going to the hospital, it's great. That's one of those things that takes years and a lot of money to complete. I wouldn't vote or want to see bond money go towards that. I would rather see it go, I think, enhancing those trails in Good Harbor North, in order to get the Cushman Trail can be done at a fairly low cost. I would like to see the Cushman Trail connected to Harbor View, through the conservation area. That's one of the things that we talked about when we were deciding to buy the conservation area. And the Wilkerson Farm, it's a beautiful spot. We bought the farm, I remember when we did years ago. But we haven't completed what could be a wonderful asset to the city. I'd like to see us spend money on that. And then there's the sports complex. I think those 4 items that I mentioned would be attractive to different people in the city if we want to get this bond passed. So there's something for everybody there. The sports complex, if the why is only, I know COVID attacked and all that kind of thing, but you know, they've been working on trying to raise money for 5, 6 years, and they've raised $1.5 million. That to me, unfortunately, is not good performance at fundraising. I saw the Fish Food Bank raise $8 million in less than a year. So I think we should help out the complex and get it done. And I think that's going to be a big leap towards getting the bond passed. So that's where I stand.
Within your, may I ask a question? Within that, would you like us to see, with the sports complex, obviously, we have the phase 1A, some form of that, then phase 2 and phase 3, would you like us to consider all of those on here and come
Yes.
back with that?
Yes.
And then separate how much it would cost in the bond,
Yes,
both separately and then together?
yes.
Oh, can I just, go ahead.
I was gonna basically propose the same thing that Lee did, or Councilmember Rodenberg. And I would like to see on the different trails, I'd like to see those together and also separately, so that we can see the impact to the bond. But I'm especially excited about the connectivity to downtown. That was one of the big things that came out in the pros planning.
Councilmember Wolf, thanks for your patience.
Yes, thank you. And I'm on board with the connectivity. I think that's really important. I prefer the sports complex phase 1A and phase 2. And I'm trying to, you know, we have 40% of our citizens here are seniors. So what will inspire our seniors to vote for this? What do they care about? And I think they might care about the Wilkinson Farm restoration. If we're looking for those voters, and historically seniors are better voters than younger folks. So if we want this bond to pass, I think we have to do something to reach for those folks as well. So those are my top ones, the trail connection, the Wilkinson Farm and sports complex 1A and 2.
Okay, see, so far, it seems like there's pretty close alignment on Wilkinson Barn rehabilitation. The sports complex, looking at it together and then separately and what that would cost, and then the trails. The trail connector.
The connected.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the Oregon for the hospital.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I haven't heard any support for Cushman phase 5.
Yeah.
Well, you haven't heard from me yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
so sorry, Councilman Anderson, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm also behind the Wilkinson Farm restoration. I think that's an excellent idea. I like the trail connectivity project. Go ahead and throw the Cushman Trail Phase 5 in there just to see how that impacts. If it's a huge impact, and we can say, no, we'll wait for later. My other question though, on the sports complex, let's say that we just decide to completely fund it. That would probably make it a long-term maintenance and operation costs for the city, because now it's no longer owned by, or at least run by, the YMCA. And I think that cost would need to be put in there as well, because long-term maintenance is not cheap. So I think that we have to, completely understand, if we say we're going to fund this thing, what the long-term ramifications are.
Yeah, that's
So
a
there you
good
have
point. I think and we need to meet with the YMCA. They've had a couple of fundraising meetings recently, and so we need to meet with Jesse and Charlie and get that update. And we can talk with them after this conversation, noting the council discussion today. I don't think I've heard from any council members prior that if any of this were to be funded through a bond for phase 1A, that we would still not look for a partnership with the YMCA for running the complex and long-term maintenance, because that definitely is something that we're currently in an agreement with them, that they have all the scheduling software and all of that great stuff. So I haven't heard that we wouldn't utilize them as the great community partner that they are, in partnership with us.
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff.
Just related to costs of operating and maintaining synthetic turf fields. We need to know that for phase 2 of the sports complex, because right now that's only on us to operate, maintain, and I've talked to our operations staff about that we need to make sure that we find out how much it's going to cost, include that as part of at least a table of estimated future costs for the phase 2-3 feasibility study. So that we can at least have that identified and then understand how much we should be charging users, so that we can recover that for the long-term operation and maintenance of those types of facilities.
And we have that information before we need to go forward with this bond. Better.
For the feasibility study?
Yeah.
No, we won't, no, the feasibility study won't be completed until this time next year.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what I
September.
thought. So we'll know there is a cost, but we won't necessarily know what that cost.
We have rough ideas based on what we've heard from
Okay.
surrounding jurisdictions, but it's, almost, it's a lot of money in over like a 10-year period for replacement.
And they have to be replaced every 10 years. Is that the story on these fields?
Something along those lines.
And that would be 1A as well?
Yes.
And we have not yet discussed with the Y if there's eagerness on their part to partner with us further on future phases. And so that's something that we could float out to them to see. I mean, the YMCA is close to there. We are already partnering with them on phase 1 of the sports complex. And so there may be an opportunity as part of that partnership to share costs of replacement. But again, we have not spoken with them about that yet.
Councilmember Wolf, did you have another comment?
I do. I want to, it said about a senior. We're not proposing in the bond anything for senior funding. And I see down here, senior community center site and scope to be determined. And there's no dollar amount there. So are we thinking about contributing anything from this bond to Penn Met Parks? Are we, where are we?
Within
on
this,
seniors?
we cannot go out for a bond on something that is not known. And so at this point, we don't know which entity in the community is going to actually construct and manage the senior center, because there are varying proposals at this point. So we cannot go out for bond funds for a hypothetical or for something that is unknown. I will note that the council does have the $200,000 in their budget for what it says is a permanent senior center home. if the city does end up partnering with one of the organizations for the senior center, eventually wherever it is, we also could, leverage city funding at that time for that. The council could consider that, as well as grant opportunities that the city may have access to that other nonprofit organizations may not have access to.
I was just gonna call on myself. I agree. Yes, I love when I do that. I agree with the historic barn. I agree with the sports, particularly getting phase 1 and 2 finished and built. Whether the appetite, depending on the economy and what our budget is, whether or not phase 3 we include right now, is an awfully big amount. I'm a little bit concerned about that, especially if we're looking at a community center. Other options down at Crescent Creek Park. So I support a balance. I definitely support the connectivity, like through our new conservation properties with the trail system. I think that there is a need to connect that, especially the sidewalks are gonna be a long way out. So, and then the Gig Harbor North Trails are inexpensive. I'm biased. I use them all the time. So, but I think your idea of the different elements to appeal to different groups is great. But I think on the whole community center thing, we need information to make a database decision to know what the need is. Is the need for seniors outside of the city? Is it inside the city? Do we partner? How do we do that? And what do we want in the community center? Do we want performing arts? Do we want arts? Do we want, what is it? And so maybe we look at that Wilkinson Farm Barn as what it could potentially provide. Do you know what the square footage is in the Wilkinson Farm Barn?
Inside?
Yeah.
It's
No,
large.
Yeah, I could tell you in a
Okay.
moment.
But
It
it would
currently
be a
has
large
2
space.
stories, but you cannot access the top because of its deteriorating conditions, but
Okay.
there was a base floor, and then you would walk upstairs, and there's kind of a mezzanine level, I guess, where they may have put hay. Okay,
Hay lawn.
I'm not a
Hay
farmer,
lawn.
so I'm looking at this. But,
We have those.
there
Yeah.
was somebody that did an analysis. It was before my time here of what it could be as a community space with a restroom. Additionally, Guy Hoffman sent me another one that I believe his nephew did, looking at kind of what it could be. It's a fairly large space, and then also noting that we have the White House that's there with the parking in between. After the barn is rehabilitated, there is the option to come back and look at that collectively of what are we going to do here? What would make most sense for the community need?
Okay, great. Councilmember Runberg, I have a question.
Yeah, I think we should note that we're talking about what's it gonna take to get the bond passed. That's important, but I don't want the public to think that that's why we're choosing these projects. These projects, every one of them that we've talked about and that we've put forward can stand on their own if we were to have funding ourselves. So these projects, in my opinion, are not chosen on what it takes to get the bond passed. They're good projects, they can stand on their own. But yes, they just coincidentally appeal to a wide range of people and hopefully voters. So I don't want anybody to think that we're handpicking those because we can get a bond.
Great, I agree. Yeah.
Just a follow-up, roughly square footage of the main floor of Wilkes Farm Barn is 2,900 square feet.
Okay. Councilmember Wood.
So going back to the Wilkinson area for restoration, so the barn can probably, because the historic registry cannot be made larger, my guess, is that correct?
If we're gonna maintain the historical integrity, we would have to keep the structure generally intact. We can rehabilitate it and then modify it inside for current use,
Right.
but we would not want to modify the structure so that it would lose its integrity.
And how about the house? Is there anything that we can do to the house to make it larger
At Wilkinson?
at Wilkinson?
I don't believe that house is on our historic register, but we can,
It's not.
It's not. So what I'm thinking is if it comes down to us, just trying to think about the seniors, right across the street from there are hundreds of seniors. And if there could be any sort of, space that could be also used, maybe not a full senior center or some kind of community center or something that would appeal to our seniors, that they would have a place to go for pool or shuffleboard, or I don't know what they do. But, what do I do? I'm a senior. But, you know, to have a larger space, we haven't really, and I don't know that this money for the Wilkinson is enough to redo anything with that White House.
No, the Wilkinson money was just to stabilize it and put in minimal improvements. It's not to.
There were two Wilkinson ones, the other one's under miscellaneous park projects that said kind of Wilkinson Farm to Park Development, but it doesn't talk about the house. It was talking about restrooms, more parking and paved trails.
2,900 feet is a lot.
But there's parking and restrooms in the top one also.
Right.
What I would like to say to that is the projects that we're talking about today, again, they were noted through a public process that these are things that people want to do. They're in our long-term capital improvement program. If these are able to be funded with a park bond that would not take general fund dollars, then theoretically, those dollars down the road would not need to be spent on these projects and could be put to other projects. So I think the way that I am thinking about this is if we're able to find this new funding source for these priority projects, that could potentially free up future budgets to be able to do some of these other pieces of work that we don't quite have the pieces in place yet of where and what it should be.
Got it. So we could maybe with the future money, we could work maybe on the White House or something, another future property. Got it. Thank you so much.
Great.
And just to clarify, under the miscellaneous park projects that Jennifer was referring to, that's the park itself. So we have a small gravel parking lot for the park itself to enhance that and to put restrooms there. And so it's for the overall park, not just the barn. The barn has its own historic project line item in this list.
Right.
And Carl,
I just wanted to note, I just looked at the Wilkinson Farm, Wilkinson Barn nomination, when it was the resolution that nominated, and it does say that the nomination was for the interior and exterior of the barn. So it is the interior and exterior nominated, so we would need a certificate of appropriateness to make any changes to the inside or the outside of that barn. So the whole structure, which is rare, it's different.
Rare, what does that rare mean?
Typically, you would just see the exterior of the structure to be considered on the register, and so making changes to the exterior would require certificate of appropriateness. In this case, they were explicit in that it would be interior and exterior of the.
So no, right now, it's not climate control, of course, on the inside of the barn. But in order to make it climate control, you would need to put it, you know, sheetrock or anything like that, and to do that, you need certificate of appropriateness on the inside.
So that's not doable, really.
I don't know, but I'm not saying it's not doable.
Right.
We've done that for the brick house as well as the Ansich net shed. That was internal and external as well. And so we worked really carefully with the design review board for the net shed in order to, because there's electrical in there as well as some steel now. And so that can be done pursuant to the Secretary of Interior standards. Once we adopt the Historic Preservation Commission, this will then go to them and they can help the city work through what that would look like.
I'm just thinking about it, usually the inside of a barn is one big open space. And if we're trying to make this usable by the community, well, I don't know that we can divide it up into smaller rooms.
We might be limited to just barn dances.
You can have barn.
Can we pull that?
Where dancing?
There we go.
Well, there you go, that'd be fun.
So those are things that we can find out as well, and Carl can get us more information on what that would be. But again, there's prescriptive standards with the Secretary of Interior about how you can in rehabilitation, and you just need to make sure that you're looking at everything and make the, Stephanie knows this better than I do, but essentially make the least amount of changes possible to make it adequate for today's human beings to utilize it.
Right.
Okay, great. Jennifer, you have.
Oh, I was just gonna point out this very cool map that, actually it was Roger's idea, but Mike Simmons pulled it off for us, that shows kind of the geographical distribution of the projects. And he has little, icons based on if it's kind of hard to see hiking or parks generally, but we can do another one based on the narrowed down, projects that you talked about for.
Well, this does get to geographic equity, and this is something that we have talked about, is ensuring that not all of our capital improvement projects are happening in one portion of the city. And so based on what Jennifer just said in this map provided by Mike, if what council's talking about right now, the sports complex obviously is in the north end of the city. The barn is more centrally located, as well as the connector trail, so that would provide for some geographical equity with improvements.
Great. Anybody else have a comment? We're almost at wrapping up.
Okay. I just wanted to reiterate what Katrina said, that these projects, the trails, the historic and the sports projects are really what came up in the parks plan over and over and over. So if we look at what people have been asking for and what we have been trying to do, I am in concurrence on those three groupings as to focus on and figure out within those groupings what fits best money-wise for a bond.
So do you think you have what you need then?
Yes, and we can also work
come
on the
forward.
messaging to the other groups. I know that, again, we've had very senior, for groups that are working towards the senior center, and we can work on that communication to them, that just because it isn't included in here, there's some intermediary steps of the PennMet feasibility study, as well as the Greater Gig Harbor Foundation. They're working on a needs assessment survey, and so those things the city is willing and ready to partner with, just not through this process.
And I think we have projects on here that plenty of our seniors are already clamoring for too.
Yes.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, so is there a motion to adjourn?
I move, we adjourn.
Okay. End of meeting.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Good job, Brenda. 4:59.